Hello, 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 hello. Ooh, get me over here. Hello. Y'all, you know how I do sometimes it's easier for me to do a video versus me doing a video, me just trying to get this all squared away and do a video. As you all are coming in, please make sure that you all are hitting that like button. I sure would appreciate it. We've got a lot to get into, but I do want to be able to make sure that you all are subscribing to my channel. So come in. Y'all, would you believe a Somali welfare fraud case in Minnesota could possibly be linked to terrorism? We're going to go over that again. Make sure you all are hitting that like button and make sure you all are subscribing. Thank you all so much for showing up. All right, let's get into. So on November 21st, 2025, Donald Trump sent out a message on his Truth Social website terminating the temporary protected status program for Somalis in Minnesota. This was done, from what I understand, is because of an uncovering of a mass welfare fraud and funds that, because of this fraud and where these funds were going, that they are possibly linked to terrorist groups in Somalia. So again, we're going to discuss this. And as you all are coming in, please make sure you all are hitting that like button. We've got some information to go. I hope I have everything in order. I tried to do that for you because I want you all to have a great show. All right, let's get into it. So this is the tweet that Donald Trump sent out. Let me make this a little bigger for y'all. I think I can make it a little bigger. Yeah. So this is the tweet that Donald Trump sent out. Well, it's not a tweet. I don't know what they call it on Truth Social. I'm just going to say it's a message. Minnesota, under Governor Walz, is a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity. I am, as President of the United States, hereby terminating, effective immediately, the temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. Somali gangs are terrorizing the people of that great state, and billions of dollars are missing. Send them back to where they came from. It is over. DJT. That is the message that was sent out. So what is he talking about? So let's review this video right here. That's going to give us pretty much what we need. Let's get back. Let's watch this video real quick.
Federal prosecutors say Minnesota is grappling with one of the biggest welfare fraud waves in U.S. history. And now counterterrorism officials warn some of that money very likely ended up in the pockets of Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda-linked terror group operating out of Somalia. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the details from Washington.
Is the biggest funder of Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked terror group in Somalia, actually the Minnesota taxpayer? A federal investigator says yes. An alarming claim first reported by City Journal, which spoke with multiple former federal agents. The U.S. Attorney's Office has charged dozens of defendants across multiple schemes, including housing aid fraud, pandemic child nutrition fraud, and false billing for autism therapy. In total.
Now, what's so interesting is because when all of this started bubbling up, you had a lot of folks saying, no, because we are immigrants, because of this, we don't get to have or get any social services from the government. But they're saying here that, yes, they do. So if you are an immigrant, you do have access to social services here in the United States. To what extent, I cannot tell you, but if they're having this level of extent of doing all of this fraud, you do have access to these services, whether directly or indirectly.
Prosecutors say these schemes have cost Minnesota taxpayers billions of dollars.
Still, there are people that have legitimately could use those resources that are not getting those resources. It's past criminal.
Minnesota is home to one of the country's largest Somali communities. Former state fraud investigator Keish Magan, himself a Somali American, wrote last year that it's uncomfortable and true that nearly all defendants in these major fraud cases come from that community.
They have taken advantage of the most generous country in the world and one of the most generous states in that country.
And according to City Journal, some of the stolen money was sent overseas through informal cash transfer networks. Investigators say once that cash arrived in Somalia, al-Shabaab took a cut, whether the sender intended that or not.
Pretty much across the board, people that I spoke to said there really isn't a law enforcement solution to this problem. As you said, that's simply playing whack-a-mole. People pretty consistently told me that, there needs to be a policy change here.
Critics claim Minnesota leaders have tiptoed around the issue, fearing a backlash from the state's powerful Somali American voting bloc.
All right. So we've just watched that. So let me just move on from here because we're talking about this. They're fearing backlash. Why are they feeling backlash? Let me real quickly look up something and then we'll continue on. All right. Let's continue. So there is about almost 6 million people that live in Minnesota. So how did the Somalis get there? So there was a large wave of Somali immigrants to Minnesota, probably around like 1990, because there was a bunch of civil war going on in Somalia. And I think that there's civil war going on in Somalia to this day. It caused widespread violence, famine, and displacement. And so the first the first swath of refugees arrived in about 1990. And the flow continued because, again, they had TPS. They had temporary, basically it's like asylum. They had this until their population has grown significantly. And so here you have it on the screen, all the reasons as to why, what was going on. There was a civil war in Somalia, collapse of the government in 1991, economic opportunities and all kinds of stuff like that. So people were coming. So there was probably a small contingency in Minnesota in 1990. They lobbied the government to help them get their family members and friends and stuff like that over, and they did. And so when you look at the contingency now, the population growth from 1990 to 2000, there is approximately 87,000 Somalis living in Minnesota. That's approximate. Some people put the numbers at 79,000, but when you're counting children and people still, people up until I guess Friday were still trickling in. You have about 87,000 Somalis in Minnesota. And these are the immigrants, first generation and second generation Somalis that are there. So you're talking about a community, a self-contained community of Somalia. 87,000 people, and most of them live in the greater area of St. Paul, Minnesota. So you're looking at a big, huge neighborhood or big, huge place, particularly in Minnesota. And yes, they are a huge voting bloc. So they are, but again, if you have situations like this, the best thing to do is to slow it down, figure out who is doing what, and get rid of those people. But if you continue to have people just coming in, and you don't get a handle on who is coming in, what they're doing, where they're coming from, who is vouching for them, you're gonna have this type and this problem that's going on. And I don't know if you all in the immigrant population understand that if you all don't get your people in check, and that is your job, get your people in check. If they're going to mess up opportunities for you, and they're going to mess up opportunities for people who want to come over and do it the legal way. Now, I will tell y'all, being very, very clear, that an offshoot of that Civil Rights Act allowed for those quotas that they had back in the day to keep people from African countries, to keep people from Asian countries, and all of those different things to keep those people from coming over. And the Civil Rights Bill allowed for you all to come over, but you all gonna have to, for those of you all that are doing it and doing it the right way, you're gonna have to get your people in check, because they're going to mess it up for yourselves, because all they have to do is put an amendment up on the bill, an amendment up, And you may find a lot of y'all gone. Get your people in check. Get your people in check. So before what happened on Friday, I saw this particular video, and I'm gonna play it first. It's the one with the guy with the blue shirt. He had mentioned something before, and like I said, I didn't have anything to juxtapose it to until I got this information today. So let's listen to his video real quick.
But understanding that they are 100 Somalian and they will never change. Now, in this clip that I'm about to show, Mr. Ali, Hassan Ali, is talking, and he's letting it be known that Ilhan Omar is there to take a Black American seat in Congress.
It is very important in Ilhan tayo, Somali tayo, measure
So you heard him say it was very important for that there be Somali and Somali ties in the United States of America, and that probably has to do with that 87,000 because they are probably sending money and stuff back home. So let's continue.
They are not here to be our friends. They are not here to fight for all Black people. They are here to fight for Somalians. That's it. Those are not my words. It's their words. It's their actions, right? So before y'all jump on here, look, just another jealous Black American. I'm not jealous of anything. We can't be beat. We're undefeated here. That's something y'all forgot. Mind you, this shit was on camera. So I want to know what y'all got to say about that. I already know that Black Americans have no allies at all. We don't have friends here. We don't have allies here, especially Africans. It's sad, but it's true. And it's not coming from us. It's coming from you guys, because you guys come over here to this country, automatically look at us as enemy number one. Then you get caught on camera doing this kind of shit. It's absolutely crazy, but I love when people show their true colors. Please tell me who you are so I can believe you the first time.
So we had that because I saw that video at first. And like I said, I had nothing to juxtapose it because, again, I'm not in Minnesota. I don't know what the ins and outs are going on in Minnesota. I don't interact with anybody from Somalia. I've never interacted with anybody from Somalia. So I really didn't know the extent of what was going on in Minnesota. So let's look at this particular video that I got from TikTok as well. All right.
Back to where they came from on his true social media. He's tired of them scamming Minnesota out of hundreds of millions of dollars. You must have heard about that Feed the Kids scam, where they said that they was feeding hundreds of thousands of kids, but they weren't. And he's tired of them terrorizing the people of Minnesota. This is Trump on his true social media. We all know that Minnesota is the home of the largest Somali community in the country. Now, we don't know how this is going to play out. We don't know if they're going to go in stealth mode and send the National Guard into Minnesota. We just don't know how he's going to implement it, or if it's even legal to do. But, we're talking about Trump. Trump, he don't care. He don't listen to the judges. When he said it's over so far, But, yeah, let me know what y'all think about it, especially the people in Minnesota.
All right. So we got that video out of the way. So, and he did make up a point that, and the reason why I wanted to play that video was because of the fact that we don't know what Trump is going to do. We don't know what he's going to do and who he's going to send where. But let me go back because he mentioned something about the Feed the Children fraud. And they also mentioned City Journal. So I just have a clip right here of what City Journal did, because here it is. It's Benny Johnson. He had a couple of he did a tweet with the information from City Journal. City Journal has a I think I got rid of it. I think I closed it down. But they have a website that you can go to and read this information from. All you have to do is put in feeding the future scandal, and we will read what the Justice Department did back in 2022. City Journal says here, Minnesota is drowning in fraud. Minnesota is drowning in fraud. Billions in taxpayer dollars have been stolen during the administration of Governor Tim Walz alone. Democratic state officials overseeing one of the most generous welfare regimes in the country are asleep at the switch. And the media, duty bound by progressive pieties, refuse to connect the dots. In many cases, the fraud has allegedly been perpetrated by members of Minnesota's sizable Somali community. Federal counterterrorism sources confirm that millions of dollars in stolen funds have been sent back to Somalia, where they ultimately landed in the hands of the terror group Al-Shabaab. As one confident source put it, the largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. This is a statement from the city council member Jamal Osman. Now, if you're familiar with that last name, you remember Rhoda Osman. Rhoda Osman was the brick lady. So she is from the Somali community. She is from that area, but she moved to Houston and now she's sitting in a Houston jail. But it says here, this is the full letter right here. We're just going to read this snippet in between. It says, tonight's comments about Somali Minnesotans are dangerous, inaccurate, and deeply hurtful. They target an entire community that has been part of Minnesota for decades and has helped build this state in every way. Somali Minnesotans are workers, parents, small business owners, nurses, teachers, and neighbors. They deserve dignity and truth. Temporary protective status is a humanitarian program that exists because returning people to unsafe conditions would be life-threatening. Somalia remains a country affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis. TPS is designed by the Department of Homeland Security, and it applies nationally. A president cannot suddenly cancel TPS for people based on the state where they live. Any attempt to do so will face immediate legal challenge, just as similar attempts did in the past. The picture being painted tonight about Somali Minnesotans is not reality. A small number of individuals have committed fraud in Minnesota. That is true across any community in every state. Yes, but we'll read over to how the extent of the fraud that's been committed. It is not a reflection of the tens of thousands of Somali Minnesotans who strengthen our community, raise families, open businesses, and contribute to every part of Minnesota life. Claims of billions missing or widespread gang activity are not supported by facts. At moments like this, leaders should calm tensions, not inflame them. We should be protecting families, not spreading fear. My office is already in contact with legal service providers, community organizers, and our federal partners to make sure families receive accurate information in the days ahead. To everyone in our community who feels afraid or targeted tonight, you belong here, you are valid, and we stand with you. Now, we have seen this president send troops to different cities in the name of getting rid of illegal immigrants, and we've seen the tactics that have been used. What will be interesting is that if he does send troops into into Minnesota, the greater St. Paul area, how will that look? How would that look, and how would that turn up? Because again, if you're telling us as the American citizenry that money has been funneled to a terrorist organization, and I don't need a tinfoil hat. I just need to use my common sense. That means that there's somebody here who is part of El Shabaab who is orchestrating all of this. Or am I wrong? So, feeding our future fraud. I'm going to let you all listen to this TikTok about what this is. And I'm going to read the Attorney General's announcement back in September 20th, 2022 about what happened. But give me a moment to connect with this.
Pandemic-era scheme in which defendants allegedly stole over $250 million meant to provide meals for low-income children. Instead of feeding kids, prosecutors say the money went toward luxury homes, high-end cars, jewelry, overseas transfers, and an entire network of shell companies. According to the DOJ, the conspirators submitted fake invoices, fabricated meal counts, and even staged photos to make it look like they were serving millions of meals that never existed. In some cases, they claimed to feed more children than lived in entire neighborhoods. A federal jury found Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, and Salim Ahmed Saeed guilty of conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, money laundering. Federal officials say more arrests may still be coming.
We didn't get that first part, so let me play it. I'm gonna play it one more time for y'all.
A $250 million fraud scheme. Already 77 people, many of them Somali immigrants, have been charged in one of the largest taxpayer-funded scams in U.S. history. Minnesota, home to the largest Somali community in America, has become the center of this massive investigation. This is the Feeding Our Future scandal, a pandemic-era scheme in which defendants allegedly stole over $250 million meant to provide meals for low-income children. Instead of feeding kids, prosecutors say the money went toward luxury homes, high-end cars, jewelry, overseas transfers, and an entire network of shell companies. According to the DOJ, the conspirators submitted fake invoices, fabricated meal counts, and even staged photos to make it look like they were serving millions of meals that never existed. In some cases, they claimed to feed more children than lived in entire neighborhoods. A federal jury found Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, and Salim Ahmed Saeed guilty of conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, money laundering. Federal officials say more arrests may still be coming.
All right, I needed you all to get that one. So let me share my screen. I'm going to switch my screen out just a minute. And as you all are coming in, please make sure you all hit that like button. If you got any questions for me, please put it down in the questions and let me know who you are and what you're doing. So it says back here, now this was a press release back in September 20th, 2022. It says U.S. Attorney announced federal charges against 47 defendants in a $250 million. I'm going to repeat that because I don't think y'all heard me back there in the back. $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. You remember in that video, you heard them say houses, luxury cars, wire transfers. Wire transfers is that important word. Remember, all of this is supposed to have been kicked off because of this particular scandal, and this with wire transfer, money was being funneled back to Somalia and into the hands of El Shabaab. Nonprofit Feeding Our Future and 200 meal sites in Minnesota perpetrated the largest COVID-19 fraud scheme in the nation. The Department of Justice announced today that federal criminal charges, now remember, this was back in 2022, and they since added several people to the point that they had 77 people that were in different phases of this scheme. These indictments alleging the largest pandemic relief scheme charged to date underscore the Department of Justice Justice's sustained commitment to combating pandemic fraud and holding accountable those who perpetrate it, says Attorney General Merrick B. Garland. In partnership with agencies across government, the Justice Department will continue to bring justice to those who have exploited the pandemic for personal gain and stolen from the American taxpayers. So this is something that seems like it's totally different from the PPP loans that people were getting, but let's continue. Today's indictment describes an egregious plot to steal public funds meant to care for children in need for what amounts to the largest pandemic relief fraud scheme yet, says FBI Director Christopher Wray. The defendants went to great lengths to exploit a program designed to feed underserved children in Minnesota amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, fraudulently diverting millions of dollars designated for the program for their own personal gain. These charges send the message that the FBI and our law enforcement partners remain vigilant and will vigorously pursue those who attempt to enrich themselves through fraudulent means. Because you all remember back in the pandemic, when kids were at home and they weren't able to go to school, these programs offered food, food. I think some of them were delivering food, some were feeding food in different places. So those school-age children that were getting that one meal in school would still get that meal. Let's see, I read that. This was a brazen scheme of staggering proportions. These defendants exploited a program. Okay. Instead, did I read all that? Yes. Instead, they prioritized their own greed, stealing more than $250 million in federal funds to purchase luxury cars, houses, jewelry, and coastal resort property abroad. I commend the work of the skilled investigators and prosecutors who unraveled the lies, deception, and mountain of false documentation to bring this complex case to light. The defendants devised and carried out a massive scheme to defraud the federal child nutrition program. The defendants obtained, misappropriated, and laundered millions of dollars in program funds that were intended as reimbursement for the cost of serving meals to children. The defendants exploited changes in the program intended to ensure underserved children receive adequate nutrition during the COVID-19 pandemic. Rather than feed the children, the defendants enriched themselves by fraudulently misappropriating millions of dollars in federal child nutrition program funds. Now, you remember all of that happened, and let's just be fair, all of that happened under Trump's watch, because when this pandemic hit, they were giving money away out of the government, and there wasn't enough checks and balances about where the money went. It was just like, here, you send the check, and we're gonna hope that you give us the information we need when we ask for it. And so you saw this issue and problem with people with the PPP loans, which were supposed to help businesses pay their employees for if they were on the payroll for work. And people were asking for a whole bunch of money under the PPP loans and buying cars and houses and doing all kinds of stuff. Mercy. Doing all kinds of stuff with the money and everything like that. So they got all those people, and particularly if you were somebody that got hundreds of thousands of dollars, did you not think that the government was going to come back and ask you about that money? So let's go over really quickly. It says the federal nutrition program administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture is a federally funded program designed to provide free meals to children in need. The USDA and Food Nutrition Services administer the program throughout the nation by distributing federal funds to state governments. In Minnesota, the Department of Education administers and oversees the federal child nutrition program. Meals funded by the federal child nutrition program are served by sites. Each site participating in the program must be sponsored by an authorized sponsoring organization. Sponsors must submit an application to MDE for each site. Sponsors are also responsible for monitoring each of their sites and preparing reimbursement claims for their site. The USDA then provides MDE federal reimbursement funds on a per meal basis. MDE provides those funds to sponsoring agency, who in turn pays the reimbursements to the site under its sponsorship. The sponsoring agency retains 10 to 15% of the funds as administration fee. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the USDA waived some of the standard requirements for participating in the federal child nutrition program. Among other things, the USDA allowed for profit restaurants to participate in the program, as well as allowed for off-site food distribution to children outside of the educational programs. So the program prior to the pandemic was you had to be a nonprofit organization to oversee this project. We will give you the funds, and then you will take 10 to 15% for your administration fee, and then the other monies you distribute to the people who assisted with feeding the children, blah, 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 blah. Amy Bach, who was the founder of Feeding Our Future, was a sponsor participating in the federal child nutrition program. The indictment charged Bach with overseeing a massive fraud scheme carried out by sites under Feeding Our Future sponsorship. Feeding Our Future went from receiving and dispersing approximately $3.4 million in federal funds in 2019 to nearly $200 million in 2021. Do y'all see that? I highlighted it. And no bells and whistles were alarmed, at least in 2020. Because if you are if you're using $3.4 million in federal funds in 2019, the pandemic is in 2020, you shouldn't see, this is what, 1,000% increase, over 1,000% increase, maybe 2,000 to 3,000% increase. 3.4 million to 200 million in 2021. As part of the charge scheme, Feeding Our Future employees recruited individuals and entities to open federal child nutrition program sites throughout the state of Minnesota. These sites, created and operated by the defendants and others, fraudulently claimed to be serving meals to thousands of children a day within just days a week of being formed. The defendants created dozens of shell companies to enroll the program as federal child nutrition program sites. The defendants also created shell companies to receive and launder the proceeds of their fraudulent scheme. And I won't read any more, but it is a whole situation scheme. And there is a case, United States versus Amy Marie Bach, with the case number. It's the United States versus Abizi Sharif Farah. United States versus Kamar Aman Ahmed Hassan. And let's see what they're she was the person who oversaw the restaurant, so I can see what they charged them with. This Farah guy, based on their fraudulent claims, the defendant received more than $40 million in federal money, which they misappropriated for their own personal benefits, including expenditures as vehicles, travel, real estate, and property in Kenya. Amy looks like here, based on her fraudulent claims, she received more than $32 million, and she misappropriated it for her personal benefit, including expenditures as vehicle, real estate, and travel. Kamar Ahmed Hassan, based on his fraudulent claims, he received more than $18 million, which they misappropriated for their own personal benefits, expenditures of cars and vehicles and real estate. Haj Osman Salad, based on his fraudulent claims, he got $25 million. He misappropriated with his own personal benefit, expenditures like vehicles, real estate, and travel. We've got Liban Yassin Al-Shir, spent the money on, received 1.6 million. Expenditures such as vehicles, real estate, and beach property in Kenya. And the last person that they have on this indictment is Sharmaki Jama. Based on their fraudulent claims, the defendants received 4.3 million, and they included expenditures of cars, real estate, and property on the Mediterranean coast of Turkey. And these are all the people that were, these are all the defendants that were outside of Amy Bach. And I'm going by their last names alone, because some of these people look like they were related to each other as well. Outside, the woman who had the authority to be able to do this is Amy Bach. Everybody else was of Somali descent. Amy Marie Bach was the person over Feeding Our Future. She was the one that had the license and everything like that to carry out this program as a nonprofit, and she allowed and I'm just making an assumption at this point. I don't know these folks, and everything I say is alleged. There's no way in the world you're gonna make me believe that she wasn't dating one of these gentlemen. I'm so sorry. You're just not gonna make me believe that she was not dating one of these gentlemen. All right, so let's continue. How far are we on time? We're doing good on time. What is going on? We're through. So we can definitely stop sharing this page. So we just have 2 more slides to share, and then we'll just get over this. So we have Trump says he's terminating the legal protection for Somali migrants in Minnesota. Donald Trump said Friday night that he's immediately terminating temporary legal protection for Somali migrants living in Minnesota. And I know that we read what the city council member has said, but the president does have that right to be able to cancel or to stop if they find that there's something illegal and they need to investigate it. They have the right as the executive office to be able to do that. And it says he's terminating temporary legal protection for Somali migrants, further targeting a program seeking to limit deportations that his administration already repeatedly sought to weaken. Minnesota has the largest Somali community. Many fled a long civil war in their East African country and were drawn to the United States, welcoming social programs. But how many migrants would be affected by Trump's announcement that he wants to end the temporary protection status could be very small. A report produced for the Congress in August put the number of Somalis covered by the program at just 705 nationwide. So that tells me that their naturalizations for those Somali citizens, for those Somalis that are going through the program, have been fast-tracked. Congress created the program granting temporary protected status in 1990. It was meant to prevent deportation of people to countries suffering from natural disasters, civil strife, and other dangerous conditions. The designation can be granted by the Homeland Security Secretary and is granted in 18-month increments. The president announced his decision on social media sites, suggesting that Minnesota was a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity. Somali gangs are terrorizing the people of the great state, and billions of dollars are missing. Send them back to where they came from. The Minnesota chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations says Trump's decision will tear families apart. Executive Director Yolani Hussein said in a statement late Friday, "This is not just a bureaucratic change, it is a political attack on the Somali and Muslim community driven by Islamophobic and hateful rhetoric." Trump promises while campaigning to win back the White House last year that his administration would deport millions of people. As part of a broader push to adopt hardline immigration policies, the Trump administration has moved to withdraw various protections that allowed immigrants to remain in the United States and work legally. That included ending TPS for 600,000 Venezuelans, 500,000 Haitians who were granted protection under President Joe Biden. The Trump administration has sought to limit protections previously extended to migrants from Cuba and Syria, among other countries. So now he has Somalia on that list. Now they're saying that they have only 715. But as we saw in my little slide, there is a population of 87,000. Let's see. And we talked about the geographical. So in the 2021 census, U.S. data, about 37,048 residents in Minnesota were born in Somalia. And let's see. Data from the 2023 Census Bureau shows that 63,192 people in Minnesota report having Somali ancestry. So that means you've got 37,000 who possibly were naturalized, minus the 715 that he says he couldn't that haven't gone through their process. But that just means that no more people are going to be able to come in. And that 63,192 people in Minnesota report having Somali ancestry. So that tells me that between 1990 and 2000, this 37,000 block group had probably 1 to 2 children. And so now from 1990 to now, you probably have a big, huge population of first generation, second generation Somali Americans. I know that they're saying that they're talking about Islamophobia and all this other stuff, but anytime that they're looking at the fact that I don't care if it's 2,000 of you out of this 87,000 population, if 2,000 of you are causing where monies is to be funneled into monies to be funneled into the hands of terrorists, your community is about to get it. Somali terror group Al-Shabaab taking a cut of millions stolen in Minnesota taxpayer money from welfare fraud schemes, reports. The radical Islamic terror group, which is longstanding ally of Al-Qaeda and considered a threat to U.S. interests, has likely been the beneficiary of money stolen in a spate of scams and sent to Somalia by the criminals defrauding the North Star state. This is a third rail conversation, but the largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. A source who worked in the federal investigation into Minnesotans attempting to join overseas terror groups told the outlet. There's an issue here that is real. And if there is ever an event that is traceable back to those funds or to people from this area, then this situation will take on a new set of optics. Minnesota has been plagued for several high-profile fraud scandals in the recent years, the largest being the Feeding Our Family scheme, for which prosecutors have racked up 56 criminal convictions, in which they alleged was a plot to steal $300 million from a federally funded program meant to feed children during the coronavirus. So they've already convicted 56 people. And you remember we saw that video where they were talking about wire transfers. Who did they transfer that money to? Yeah, they probably transferred money to pay for those villas and seaside, oceanside property. But if they were doing this, what makes you think that they were not transferring money to someone who then will transfer money to someone till it gets to El Shabaab? Former fraud investigator Kaish Magan, a Somali American who had worked in the Minnesota Attorney General office, noted in an op-ed last year that it's uncomfortable and true that nearly all the defendants in several Minnesota fraud cases, including Feeding Our Future, are from my community, the Somali community. David Gaither, a former Republican Minnesota state senator, believes state Democrats and the media have ignored fraud being perpetrated by members of the state's large and politically influenced Somali community, which has made the problem worse. The media doesn't want to put a light on this, and if you are a politician, it is a significant disadvantage for you to alienate the Somali community. Well, I will say this: there is 87,000 people who live in the greater Minnesota area, St. Paul, Minnesota, St. Paul, Minneapolis area, and I would just say this: they have a reckoning to attend to, and again, they have to get their people in check. And if they're not willing to get their people in check, then the government has to get their people in check. And I know that the politicians don't want that bad soundbite of seeing crying mothers and crying children and people being carted off to jail and all of that other stuff. But these are consequences of your own making. But I would say this: you got to treat them with a long-handled spoon. They have shown you that they are willing to steal millions upon millions of dollars for their own needs. Those 56 that were indicted. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, ain't nobody over here being holier than thou. Every community, well, every immigrant community has their people that does what they do. Even in the Black American community, even though we're not an immigrant community, we got folks that do some stuff too. But you got to get your people in check, or the law is going to get them in check. See, gone are the days where you can cry and scream and, oh my goodness, we are just poor immigrants and we don't know. Gone are the days of that. Everyone knows and sees what's going on. And you either do it the right way or you don't do it at all. You go back to where you come from. You're not in your country because you can't do what you want to do in your own country. But you think you can come over here and do what you want to do and no one say anything to you and treat you with kid gloves. A mess. An absolute mess. So what do y'all think? That's a lot going on, isn't it? That is a lot going on, and they are still working, and you are in an administration that's going to find a connection, even if they don't even believe that there's a connection. They're going to find a connection. And are they going to send troops to to Minnesota? I don't know. The total population of the state of Minnesota is 5.84 million people. So even though that's a big contingency of the Somali population, they're still having to deal with the other populations that are there. So back in October, it says Republican Minnesota government candidate blasts Tim Walz on election integrity. Fraud capital of the country. Illegal migrants and their non-citizen and other non-citizen in Minnesota could circumvent election law and vote simply by presenting a driver's license on election day, though election officials stress that practice is illegal. Because they have to register to vote. They only use their ID to match voter registration. All right, people. I'm just trying to make sure that I haven't lost any news that I wanted to go on this subject. I'm definitely going to go back and look at those cases. There's several of them. I'm just curious as to who hasn't been charged and indicted, because when you looked at that charging form and you looked at the people who were they were families. These are people, because we heard from the that's what I'm looking for. The letter from the city council member. The picture being painted tonight about Somali Minnesotans is not reality. A small number of individuals have committed fraud in Minnesota. That is true across every community in every state. It is not a reflection of the tens of thousands of Somali Minnesotans who strengthen our community, raise families, open businesses, and contribute to every part of Minnesota life. And again, how were they able to commit this fraud? Because they were allowed to use for-profit businesses. And so what you see is you have a lot of those for-profit businesses that have commit fraud, and it is considered welfare fraud. They have committed fraud, and it looks like families upon families were locked up. All right, people, we do this every week. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you care. Y'all tell me what y'all think about Donald Trump, your president, Donald Trump, revoking the TPR status for the Somalians in Minnesota. Do you think that this is just headline news, or do you think he's serious, and do you think he's going to be sending troops to Minnesota, sending troops to Minneapolis? We will see. All right, people, please tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker, tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. And as always, people, bye-bye.